Actually, Gordon just jumped on right now.
Yep. No,
Hey,
Steve,
sorry for being late. In my defense, I was sending an MRP email.
Oh, no, you're good. So I'm going to go ahead and kick things off just because we're recording and we've got an audience. So good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Tankel. I'm the Director of Projects for Middle River Power. For those of you that are not aware, we are subjected to various requirements from an environmental awareness standpoint. And prior to any construction and ground disturbance activities occurring, we are all subjected to attend this training that is being put on by Rincon, who has been brought on by MRP to help support us. Some of you have probably seen a few of the names that are on here supporting our Henrietta project, but the purpose of today's training is to cover the site-specific environmental, biological, archaeological, paleontology, and a few other different requirements if any kind of ground disturbances, discoveries were made. I know quite a few people are obviously missing this training as well. This is kind of meant for a information type purpose. It is going to be recorded. It will be, we will have a link to a SharePoint that we will be able to share out. So as you identify all of your supporting workforce, if they can watch that prior to arriving at our respective facilities, that would be greatly appreciated. And if it's not already in the comment section, I believe Elizabeth will be putting a note in the chat. If you guys can all send over an email with your name and your phone number and your email address, she is going to get you added to a roster for each of the sites. And as your respective subs and additional workforce watch the training, if they can send over their information as well, so we have a record of successful completion, that would be greatly appreciated. And without further ado, I'm going to pass this off to Kevin from Rincon. He is going to take the lead from here on out, and appreciate everyone's attendance today.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it. Hi, I'm Kevin. Represent the environmental compliance team at Rincon Consultants. We're excuse my dog. We're tasked with running the WEAP that I'm going to be running today. We're going to be covering biological, cultural, and paleontological resources. This WEAP worker environmental program is required to work on the project. So we're going to be doing 3 projects in one today. I'm going to start the slideshow right now. Can you guys see my screen or see the show?
No, we still see your face.
Not yet,
Kevin. Sorry, let me try this again. This is always a... Let's try it this way.
It's like, we got it.
There we go.
There we go. All righty, here we go, guys. So this is the Worker Environmental Awareness Program. We're going to be covering 3 projects in one today. We're going to be covering the Henrietta BESS project, the Malaga BESS project, and the Hanford BESS project. The purpose of this Worker Environmental Awareness Program outlines requirements and procedures for protecting environmental resources, including cultural, paleo, and biological resources. It was designed to provide construction workers and project crews with information about potential encounters and impacts to these resources. It's a requirement, as I mentioned, for project implementation and construction, and it also outlines some of the legal obligations and that we need to abide by for protecting environmental resources and penalties associated with impacts to those resources, which we are all here to avoid. Some of the goals of the WEAP is to be individually responsive in recognizing cultural, paleo, and biological resources, know what to do in order to avoid impacting these resources, recognize and be aware of the potential resources that might be present on site, and by their awareness, protect the resources on site if you do encounter them, and learn the evaluation and importance of environmental resources to the specialists. So I'm going to introduce our specialists for paleo, biological, and cultural resources. They're going to present their subsequent expertise. This is an outline of the Henrietta BESS. As I mentioned, we're doing 3 projects today. So the purple represents the BESS area that we'll be working at in Henrietta. The Malaga purple represents the BESS area for that project. And the Hanford BESS Purple represents the BESS for that project. The yellow represents laydown in this. Just a brief overview of the construction type and what we're doing. It includes existing roadways and upgrades, site preparation, mobilization, excavation, earthwork, installation, paving, surfacing, concrete pad foundations, pole foundations, etc. So these are all fairly similar projects in the scope. There's definitely some nuance, and each one you're working on specifically will be outlined as you kind of work on those projects. But this is just a broad overview of what we're going to be doing. We're going to be digging. We're going to be putting stuff in. We're going to be moving earth around and things like that. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it off to Matt Gonzalez, our cultural resources representative, and he's going to discuss how to recognize cultural resources, what to do if you see them, and some of the other requirements for these projects. So Matt, take it away, and when you're ready, just say next slide, and I'll move on.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Matt Gonzalez. I'm a senior archaeologist here with Rincon, and I'm sure the majority of you have already been through these WEAP trainings before, so I'll try to keep it brief. If you haven't been through these yet, I'm sure you're going to go through a ton of them in the near future if this is the line of work you're going to be doing. So basically, cultural resources are remnants of human past for prehistoric as well as historic. Historic is usually 45 to 50 years or older. And so any artifacts, anything that's found from those time periods is what we are looking for. So it can include everything. I mean, I'm sure everyone has seen arrowheads. Everyone has seen like various artifacts like that, old bottles and those types of things. So those are the main things that people see, but it's also some more unusual things like small bones that can be remnants of what they ate, and we can actually date those types of things. So there's some smaller items that you may not know of, but just keep an eye out for them. If there's anything unusual that looks like it shouldn't be there, you can call it out. Go ahead, Kevin. So again, here's an example of the projectile points that I'm sure a lot of people have seen. The potential to find these things really depends on the area. So I know one of the best areas is located in the ag field. So with those areas, even if the ag fields have been around for 100 years, it's likely that only the top 1 to 2 feet have been disturbed previously through all the agricultural activities. So anything below that, there's a good chance to find previously undisturbed sediments. Even within the disturbed sediments, there's a good chance that you can find stone artifacts like these, because they'll just keep getting moved around and will stay around for years. When it comes to the historic artifacts, like the glass bottles, you'll only find shards and those kinds of things, just broken pieces in those areas. There's in areas where it's there's been previous development, so the top maybe 2 or 3 feet may have been previously disturbed. There's a chance where you can find historic stuff depending on what they did. So you can find whole bottles if they just kind of threw their trash in their trench and then reburied it. But most of the time, you're not going to find intact sites until you get below those points. All right, next slide, Kevin.
All right.
So as Kevin mentioned, there are legal obligations. There's both state and federal laws that we need to follow when it comes to cultural resources. And each of those laws will have penalties associated with it. So if you're collecting artifacts, if you're damaging sites, those types of things, there are penalties, and some of them are pretty stiff with some hefty financial fines as well as some jail time. So if you find artifacts, if you see anything, just leave it there, contact the cultural resource specialist, and we'll deal with it from there. Go ahead, Kev. Again, this is going with the penalties. Human remains, obviously, I haven't mentioned that yet either, but if we find human remains, avoid it, don't touch it, contact the coroner, and there's a whole process that goes along with that, where the coroner will come out identify it, see if it's related to a crime scene or if it's Native American in nature, and then there's different processes that come up depending on what the coroner finds. Go ahead. These are some examples of artifacts. Groundstone artifacts is what they use to grind up their food, to make meal or various things. So these are some examples of monos and hammerstones. And then on the right are some pestles. All right, next. Flake stones or lithic tools. Again, the arrowheads. There can also be some flakes or scrapers like we see here on the right, and some cores. Just basically stone tools that they sharpen to use for various purposes, cutting, chopping, hunting, those types of things. Go ahead. Middens are something that shows a little bit more deposition, where you'll be able to see it if you're trenching. You can see here in this photo here, it's a shell midden. So even though it's a cut here, it looks like it's probably eroded in this area, you can see that it's pretty deep. It's not just a superficial find. So those tend to have a lot more information potential in them, because you can see the layers of time that go through there and the use of the area. The same thing with hearts. You can find where they'll be building fires, and then if they use the same area for years, you'll see a depth of ash in that area from when they used it, and we can find again bones and stuff like that, and that they ate during that time. Next. Tribal cultural resources. This was something that was added within recent years. I believe it was 2014, 2015, to CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. And it's to protect tribal resources that they find to be significant. In the past, there was artifacts that were found, and unfortunately, not only archaeologists, but other people would be like, oh, this is just nothing. It doesn't mean anything. But to the tribe, it actually meant a lot more than people were giving them credit for. And it wasn't just artifacts. It was also places. It was also trees. It was also trails and stuff like that, where something significant happened there for the tribes, and they were just kind of getting blown through. So the tribal culture resources was added to protect more of their resources. So a good example is trade routes. So when the tribes would trade between each other, it was footpaths. So there would be a beaten trail where there wouldn't be any vegetation. And then as in historic time, as the Europeans came and started moving into the area, they would make those trade routes into wagon trails or into roads, and eventually highways and freeways. And so most of the roads and stuff we have today were originally trails from the tribes. And when they were moving along those trails, if someone passed away, they would get buried right there on those trails. And so that's why they're significant to them. So they want these certain things like that to be protected more than they were previously. So that's what the tribal cultural resources are. All right, next, Kev. Historic period, again, if you guys have worked in the desert, I'm sure you've seen gigantic piles that can go on for acres of these cans. I'm sure you guys have come across bottles. These are considered historic period artifacts. So if you find these, we'll record them. If we're able to get data from them, then we will. Others, if it's just fragments or some of these kind of sanitary cans, we're not going to get much information from, but again, you see them, let us know. All right, next, Kev. Identifying artifacts can be a little tricky, just because it does take a trained eye. But if you look at the photos here, I mean, you can see there's kind of some rocks or pebbles here on the outside of that photo, but in the middle, they look slightly different. You can see they kind of have some jagged edges, different colorations as well. If you see something like that, you can point it out as well. That way we can kind of take a look at it and see. The same thing, the photo on the bottom, the pottery, sometimes it just looks like a rock. I mean, you can see the ones at the bottom are still covered in mud. It looks like a rock, but a lot of times there's slight variations that will kind of allow your eye to kind of focus on that, and you'll realize, hey, this is different. This isn't supposed to be here. This could be an artifact. So I know it can be tricky, but doing the best we can, that's all we can really do. Obviously, you guys haven't been as extensive training, but if you see something that looks out of place or unusual, let somebody know. Go ahead, Kev. Historic period, again, we're going to be able to notice most of the things because we still see a lot of the similar things today. If you're seeing just little rusted fragments of metal that are kind of in a pile, similar to kind of the bottom left corner of the photo below, you can point that out because there could be something that subsurface, such as these bottles and stuff, that will pop out. Historically, they would just bury their trash and just burn it. And so we'll find these trash pits where there's just years and years of historic artifacts. So again, you see something pointed out so that we can take a look. Go ahead, Kev. Here's another example of some of the buried sediments where you can see the deposition, the deeper soils, where obviously the top photo you see it's just kind of a normal sediment. Then all of a sudden there's something weird. There's an anomaly there that shouldn't be there. So something was going on. So you start seeing discolorations or changes in the soils like that. Let us know, because that's a good chance there's going to be some buried resources in those areas. All right, next. Similar to the ones in the previous slide were the prehistoric ones. You can see some shell and stuff in those ones. These ones here, it'll be a similar change in the soil, except you're not going to be seeing shell. Most likely you're going to be seeing cans and bottles and nails and pieces of wood and those types of things. Go ahead, next slide, Kevin. So the procedures, if you guys find something, we would like to halt all ground disturbing activities within 100 feet of that resource until a qualified archaeologist can get out there. Once we get out there, we can take a look and determine the significance, whether it's something that we need to do additional work for, or just kind of collect it and move on. Work can continue outside of that 100-foot area. So if you guys have other areas you can move to, you guys can do that. If it's determined to be significant, there could be potential other work that needs to be done, some excavations. If it's determined to be prehistoric or tribal cultural resource, the tribes will likely need to get involved to come and take a look as well. We'll need to probably do additional WEAP trainings just to let everybody know, hey, we're finding these resources in this area. So you guys really need to keep an eye out for these specific resources. So we can kind of tailor it rather than having this broad training to a more specific training to what we're finding in that area. Let's see. So redirect work. Yeah, leave the find alone until we get there. Again, removing artifacts, collecting artifacts, damaging the artifacts intentionally, hiding them, those types of things. There's laws protecting them, and there's pretty hefty fines. So try to avoid that. All right, next, Kev. Let's see. Okay, so there's some specific requirements for each of the BESS areas. So all ground disturbing activities for the Henrietta BESS that go to 4.5 feet have to be monitored by a cultural resource monitor. So any ground disturbing activities, there has to be a monitor on site. If you don't have a monitor on site, you need to let somebody know as soon as possible so we can get somebody out there. So that's going to require some communication between all parties. That way we have enough time to have somebody mobilized to be out there. The same thing with the tribal monitors. We're going to need requirements. Like it can't be a situation where you're like, it's Friday night and you're like, hey, we need somebody out there Monday morning or Monday afternoon. And hey, we need somebody out there tomorrow. Because it's likely going to have to push your schedule out in order for us to get a monitor there. So give us a good amount of time so that we can make sure that we have somebody mobilized for you out there. If cultural resources are disturbed or unearthed during that time, again, as we mentioned in the last slide, all work should be halted in that area. And the cultural and Native American monitors will evaluate it there. Since they're on site, we'll just have to move 50 feet away. So that way we can have that area safe so that they can get in there and look, and then you can get back to working from there. Let's see. Again, if it's found to be significant, and especially if it's like human remains or something like that, additional work is going to need to be done. So work in that area is probably going to be stopped for a little while until we can get it all evaluated. All right, go ahead, Kev. For the Malaga and Hanford sites, it's going to be a similar situation. Where we'll have to stop the 50 feet if something is found, notify your supervisor, and an archaeologist will be called to evaluate it. So for those two sites, because of the previous development, there won't need to be a monitor there present during all activities. But if we do have an unanticipated find, monitoring may be required beyond that point, depending on what is found. All right, go ahead, Kev. Reporting requirements for human remains. Again, this is really important. If you find human bones or even just bones that could be human, I know we're not all osteologists or bone specialists, but if you find bones, stop work immediately. Notify your supervisor and notify the cultural resource specialists and the Native American monitor if they are on site. Again, federal law protects Native Americans, human remains. There's state laws that also protect them. It's illegal to disturb them. And we'll have the cultural resource specialists let you know what you need to do if they're on site. If not, again, we need to contact the coroner, have them come in to determine that it is human, one, and that whether it's native or more recent remains. Next slide. Construction activity for archaeological resources. Ground disturbing activities. Any ground disturbing activities have the potential to disturb artifacts. So that it could be whether you're digging with a shovel, it could be grading with the excavator, drilling, even just minor scraping of the surface with a blade. It has a potential to disturb cultural resources. So for the Henrietta site, we'll be monitoring those activities. For the other sites, during those activities, be on the lookout for cultural resources. All right, okay.
All right, thanks,
that's
Matt.
it for me.
Appreciate it. So again, for Henrietta, we are going to have archaeological specialists typically on site. If you do find something, reach out to them directly. For Malaga and Hanford, monitoring is not going to be required on those. So notify your site supervisor if you do find something out there, and they will notify me. So again, Matt mentioned scheduling and deployment. I work directly with MRP to make sure we have resources available and ready to go out there when required. I know it's construction, schedules change and they change at the last minute. So as soon as you know something, please notify the site supervisor, who will notify me. If we need to pivot or react, I can do it in real time. And the sooner I know, the sooner we get somebody out there. So just wanted to mention that. We're going to next go into paleontological resources with Jennifer DiCenzo. And she's going to discuss those resources for protection and avoidance. So Jennifer, take it away.
Hey, Jennifer, you're muted.
Thank you.
All right, so this slide just kind of talks a little bit about what paleontological resources are, and paleontological resources are fossils. So that can be bones from animals, it could be shells, it can be plants and other things, but that's mainly what you're looking for out there. The sediments that you guys are in are Ice Age sediments, so they're definitely older than 5,000 years old, and that's why we're required to have this mitigation on your job site specifically. Next slide. So you're not going to necessarily find fossils at the surface. In fact, on your guys' job site, you're going to find them once you're digging pretty deep. And once we get to the slides that shows the specific mitigation for the different project areas, you'll see that sometimes it's not until you hit 4.5 feet deep. Sometimes it's not until deeper, but the surface sediments on your job is a little bit younger, less than 5 years. So 5,000 years. So we're not necessarily worried about the surface. It'll be once you start digging. Go ahead. So this middle slide right here is probably more like you're going to see them on your job site. These two other slides on our pictures on either side are once we've cleaned them up in the lab after we've gotten them off the site. But, you know, just similar to what Matt said, you're going to see a clump of rocks, and then one of those clumps is going to look a little more like a bone, and that'll trigger you to say, maybe we should take a little closer look at that. And again, just similar with the archaeology, you're not responsible for identifying any of these fossils, but everybody on the site is responsible for bringing it to the attention and protecting those. So that's why you guys are going to be our eyes on the ground, and then you have us to back you up to keep you in compliance with the project requirements. Next slide. Here are some representative fossils of things that you might find out there. You might find a turtle carapace or just a piece of it. You might find teeth. Those are a little bit easier to recognize than a clump of bone. And you might not recognize what kind of tooth it is, but you'll recognize that it's a tooth, and then we can check that out. Go ahead. Okay, so the project-specific mitigation measures is pretty much just introduces those. You can skip to the next slide. So Henrietta is probably the best chance of any fossil remains coming up. Still unlikely, but in the rare event that a fossil did come up, we have the protocol. So whenever you guys are excavating anything deeper than 4.5 feet, then that's when you need to really start looking out for the fossils, or have the monitor on the site for any excavations deeper than 4.5 feet. And if you have anything deeper than that, just let Kevin know, and we'll send somebody out there to monitor it. Next slide. No mitigation required on Hanford BESS. You guys are off the hook on that one. Next slide. And Malaga, nothing required on that site either. But if you do find a fossil on that site, similar to the archaeology requirements, we're going to create a 50-foot buffer. You can continue work outside of that 50-foot buffer and then contact us. A lot of times we can write something off by just pictures, and we don't necessarily need to send somebody out there. But sometimes it's not possible to tell from pictures, and we would need to send somebody out there. So you want to leave the fossils in place. You never want to pick up the fossil and then take it to the office. Leave it in place, because even if you see a tooth laying there, it's possible that the rest of the skull with more teeth is laying just a little bit deeper or to the side in the cut. Next slide. Here's a list of the actual protocol for you guys to do. The takeaway really is to stop work right where you're digging and notify your supervisor to notify us. Go ahead to the next slide, Kevin. And here, in case it wasn't clear before, just whatever you do, don't continue digging in that spot. just give us a call, let us know. We will take care of it as quickly as possible and get you back working in that area as soon as possible. So this is, again, a very similar slide to the archaeology slide. These are the types of digging that it could be, but any excavation, especially any excavation deeper than 4.5 feet at Henrietta, has the potential to disturb paleontological resources. Go ahead.
All right, thanks, Jennifer. Appreciate it. So that was a quick review of what paleontological resources might be encountered, kind of what they look like, and best protocols for avoiding them, and also, importantly, notification to the site supervisor or the on-site monitor. If you do see something for further inspection, leave it in place, check it out. It may not be anything and we'll be on our way. But again, don't continue digging and don't pick it up, because that could create a longer, turnaround time to get back to work. Moving on to something we will see definitely is going to be some biological resources on site near the project and within the project itself. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Ryan Wardle, our designated biologist for many of these projects. You may see him on site now and then, kind of inspecting things, and especially as we get into nesting season here in the next few months, we're going to probably be seeing a little bit more of him for inspection of nesting birds and also other species that are protected. So Ryan, I'll let you take it away.
Sweet. Morning, guys. Yeah, so as Kevin mentioned, bio stuff, it's kind of everywhere. Kind of just depends on what species and resources we're looking at. There's a whole bunch of different laws about it, federal, state, as well as even international, like the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and Bald and Gold Eagle Protection Act, some of those, just because, these birds that migrate through a dozen different countries through Central America to get up here, it's kind of even international law at some point protecting these things. So similar to other resources, there's a lot of penalties that could come with damage or harm to those, some specific to the project, some that could even be personal liability on those. So similar to everything, let's just make sure we're doing our best to stay in compliance and avoiding any problems resulting from that. So next slide. Cool. These are some of the species kind of that are potential. It's going to vary slightly between each of these projects, what really has the potential to occur, but kind of they're all similar-ish areas. And so always a loose potential for any of these. The San Joaquin kit fox, Swainson's hawk, raptors and nesting birds, and then certain local tree ordinances have protections as well. So we can kind of go through each of those. I think there's a slide for each if we want to go forward. Like Amalaga, yeah, less potential for kit fox and Swainson's hawk, but add the potential for burrowing owl there as well. And Hanford, kit fox again, and burrowing owl. So again, these aren't necessarily hard and fast. These are always based off records of what's been seen, what's nearby. But when you think about, migratory birds, Swainson's hawks overwinter and Central America, burrowing owls, migrate around as well. And so there's potential that maybe they haven't been seen there for years. And then all of a sudden the project looks like a nice, suitable home for them when they're flying up this year and they, choose that site. So kind of keep an eye out for any of these things on all the projects, because there's always potential. Just because they weren't there yesterday doesn't mean they're not going to be there tomorrow. They're mobile animals, and there's always potential for something new and unusual to show up. Forward. Yeah, so nesting birds, typically nesting bird season, February 1st through September 1st. That's kind of typically, the calendar dates, but as we all know, the seasons can do weird things. And so if it's warm early, the birds might nest early. If it's, good conditions late, they might continue to nest late. So there's sort of always year-round potential, definitely significantly lower this time of year, and should be ramping up again in the springtime, especially on these sites, depending on if they've been developed or not. Birds love human structures, towers, vehicles, equipment. Just these little tiny hidey holes, some nice shelter, maybe the engine keeps it a little warmer sort of thing. So the birds don't realize that this, piece of equipment that's been sitting there and not being used for the last week, because it's not that, part of the project. They will go in there and set up their nest, and then all of a sudden, once you go back to use it, you find there's a nest that's in there. So something I always recommend on project sites during nesting season is, if there is equipment that's maybe sitting idle, it's not needed for that phase, just continue to kind of rotate that around, just get in, rumble it, move it around, and that should deter the birds from thinking that's a good spot. But yeah, for the most part, there's should be nothing going on for the next few months, but especially as spring starts coming around, this could be a bigger problem. And again, there's kind of potential in any of the veg trimming, if there's like a tree or bushes that need to get removed. Birds could be nesting in there. They're not just in like trees. A lot of birds even nest on the ground in little tufts of grass. So kind of any natural area that's, been undisturbed for any period of time, birds will take advantage of that. So especially during the spring, keep an eye out for this. Even otherwise, if you do see anything. And actually, will you go to the next slide, Kevin? I think there's one more for this. So a lot of times you're just looking for the actual nest, but other behaviors too. If you see birds carrying grass or twigs around, that's because they're building a nest. They don't really do that for any other reason. If you see, say like that hawk's got the mouse, it's, carrying food, they're probably bringing it back to their nestlings. Male territorial fighting behavior, stuff like that. So even if you don't necessarily see the actual nest, if you see like a bird with a piece of grass going into the same bush over and over and over, it's like, okay, maybe you can't find it in there. They survive by being good at hiding. That's a good indicator. And if they're carrying food, again, it's indicator that there's probably something. So, keep an eye out for some of those things as well, just beyond the actual nest cut. So yeah, next slide. Kit fox have potential at some of these sites, so they're definitely in the area. I know a lot of these are surrounded by development, but kit fox actually kind of like solar farms. They like agricultural fields because they oftentimes protect them from other predators. They're pretty small, so coyotes will actually prey on them as well if they can. So you might think, oh, there's not really any good habitat out here, but a lot of times they're hiding. They'll like dig their burrows in the panels. They spend most of the day underground. So for the most part, you're going to see them early morning, evening time. During the heat of the day, they're usually sleeping underground. And so, you might not even really see them during the work area or, in the work area during work hours, but it doesn't mean that they might not be coming in at night. If you do see something that looks like a baby coyote or like a weird little cat and just, there's something off about it, you're like, I don't know what that was. It's some small kind of cat, dog looking thing, could very well be a kit fox. So don't just assume it's a coyote. A lot of times it is, but if you see it and, it's kind of something's not quite right, definitely reach out, give me a call, give Kevin a call. And, it's worth checking because, they are federally endangered and state threatened, so pretty sensitive. And another note is they're foxes. They're very curious. They will come into the job site if you're leaving food and trash and everything around, like that will actually like draw them in. So always make sure in these areas to be really good about keeping trash, lids on and getting things off site as appropriate, because we don't want to be like luring them in if they weren't there and then all of a sudden they, find some wrappers or something, and now they're going to be showing up every night and causing problems. So trash is really important with these guys. Yeah. Burrowing owls, they're pretty much the only kind of owl looking bird that's going to be in a hole in the ground. So if you see something that looks like that, there's like a hole and there's an owl in it, it's probably a burrowing owl. They typically will take over old squirrel dens or old fox dens. So if you are seeing, larger holes, a couple inches in diameter holes throughout the project area with like, bird droppings and pellets and stuff, that's another good indicator that, there may be a burrowing owl present. The one thing that I will note about these guys too is they love pipes. So if at any point there's any kind of like pipes that are being staged or equipment similar to that, make sure to like cover it with some plastic, put an end cap on it, because they'll see that as like their perfect little burrow and go in there. And then all of a sudden, when you go to start, moving that equipment, there's a burrowing owl nest in there. That's a, big problem for that. So definitely any like kind of hole type pipes or other similar material, make sure it's covered. And then as well, just sort of keep an eye out for burrows and stuff within the area. They do migrate throughout the year. They kind of change between winter and summer habitat. So again, just because they're not there at one time of year doesn't mean they can't show up at some point. So another one, just don't get complacent on equipment staging and stuff like that, because they could just show up any night and be there. So yeah. Swainson's hawk, they are also migratory, so they are up here, spring and summer for breeding. So throughout the winter, really low potential, almost no potential this time of year for them to be on site, never none. As always, these are animals and they have minds of their own, but during the spring and summer, as they come up, they will find their nest sites. They also forage over open grasslands, and so a lot of these kind of agricultural sort of, fallow fields, stuff like that, they love in these areas. They kind of need a little bit more nesting structure, so keep an eye out on transmission lines, towers, other project stuff. They're not going to be like nesting on the ground or anything like that. They kind of need a little more, but if you do see any large stick nests in a tower, any hawks, they are related to red-tailed hawks, and they come in a bunch of different color morphs, so they can actually be pretty tricky. So if you see like hawks building a nest on site, those are also protected anyway, not as sensitive. But just any hawks in the area, any big stick nests, definitely let us know. We can come out, scope those out. They typically can even reuse the same nests year to year. So if it was like, hey, there was one here last year, even if it's not active right now, we may come back in the spring and just see if it's been reutilized. So they should be fairly obvious. Big hawks soaring around. The nests are pretty large and going to be fairly conspicuous, but just in general, if you see any kind of hawks being active on site repeatedly, that's definitely worth raising a flag about. Yeah, and again, you can go through these at a different point, but there are penalties, jail time, fines, some that are even specific to the individual. So don't just assume it's sort of like, this will go on to the project, they'll pay the fine and we'll, keep the project moving. That's not the case. Could be personally liable for harming these species. So just in general, it's better if you don't see a little fox or something, raise that flag and we'll come check it out. Yeah, just kind of a lot of general measures work pretty well here. Don't be speeding through the work area, especially, with potential for foxes. They're like, dogs. They'll just run out in front of traffic. And so, they're not smart. They don't understand that kind of workflow. So, keep an eye on kind of speed through the work area, equipment and stuff like that. If it's, leaking, oil spills, those are all just sort of basic things. But definitely, if that is an issue, something that needs to be addressed. So just keep an eye out for any kind of leaks or runoff. I don't think any of these projects have any kind of waterways or creeks or anything sensitive, but especially during the rainy season, there's always potential for stormwater runoff and things like that could become a problem if some straw wattles, just kind of typical best management practices. Yeah, these are all kind of just more general measures. So trash, again, make sure all your trash is collected, secured, that it's got a lid, something that's going to prevent wildlife from getting into that. I know you guys are really good about that already, but just, to reiterate that, we don't want to be luring in anything like a kit fox, coming and getting some trash. It's going to be coming back time and again if it, gets anything from there. So let's not be making anything attractive for wildlife. Excavations, if there's any excavations that are deep, we want to make sure there's nothing that's going to be falling in there, getting trapped. I know you guys are pretty good about, covering things in general, especially if they pose a safety concern, but even smaller things that, we might be able to just step over, stuff like that could become entrapment hazard. So any trenches, any pits, anything like that that's left open, either cover it or make sure there's an earthen escape ramp. If it's something, maybe put a 2x4 at an angle, just something so that if wildlife falls in there, it's able to get back out and isn't going to get trapped. Same thing for pipes. Make sure they're covered, they're capped, that they're staged in some way. This is the kind of stuff that birds love to nest in. Burrowing owls can use pipes as dens. Kit fox could see that as an artificial den, depending on the size. Some of these, so especially for pipes or conduit or other things, material like that, getting the ends capped, making sure that those are covered, wrapped in some way that's going to prevent wildlife from getting in, because they love that sort of stuff. And then rodenticide, is prohibited at Henrietta, so no rodenticide at all. But make sure that you're checking with MRP for all pest management methods, depending on the other sites. This can definitely be sensitive depending on the potential for small mammals and other wildlife in the area. So again, prohibited for use at Henrietta, but just in general, double check all pest management applications with MRP prior to implementation. I think that's it. Is there one more? Yeah, if there is anything, again, just give us a call. If it doesn't look quite right, if you don't know what it is, just kind of let's assume something sensitive. Don't really be, picking up nests or moving stuff like that. It's just leave it alone, and always take photos if you're not sure, like, hey, is this something? What is this? And if it's nothing, we can let you know. But if it's like, hey, that's actually a, special status species, that's something sensitive, we'll get out there right away and kind of figure out exactly what needs to get done to proceed. So just as always, yeah, kind of better to just observe, don't mess with anything, and kind of check in, and we'll come figure it out from there. So I think that's, yeah, and this is kind of stuff I already mentioned: trimming trees, grading areas that have not been previously disturbed, leaving pipes, trash, just kind of common sense stuff, what could be impacting wildlife.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. So that's a general overview of biological resources, avoidance, and notification if we do find said resources. You are likely to have some biological resources on your project. That's almost a guarantee. So stay vigilant, inspect equipment, move equipment, like Ryan said. Those critters like to get in there, and some are actually really attracted to construction sites. And I've had many a project or many piece of equipment closed down for several weeks because maybe a house finch went in there and made a nice little nest. And at that point, well, you got to wait till those little guys fledge. So pretty important stuff, especially the housekeeping. General points of contact for the 3 projects. Again, I'm Kevin Hostert. I'm kind of the project and compliance manager. Work directly with Ryan, Jen, and Matt and other folks on these resources. Work also directly with Josh on these sites. So Josh and I talk often, schedule together regular notifications and updates. So you can feel free to reach out to me if you see something, or Josh if you see something as well. And then Alyssa Newcomb, she's out actually in the field right now, but she's going to be the Cultural Resources Program Manager. If there are cultural resources found, she's usually going to be the one to maybe notify an agency or consult with an agency, or send somebody out there to do some inspection and analysis. Jennifer DiCenzo also presented in this, so she's going to be the paleontological resource expert. And then Ryan Wardle for Henrietta and Malaga is going to be the qualified biologist, and then Morgan Craig will be the Hanford. But again, if you do see something, it's best to notify me, and then I can get the appropriate troops out there to take care of it. Oops. So that kind of ends the presentation and the WEAP. Again, we're out there to make sure this project gets delivered. We're not out there to get you in trouble or trick you or tell on you or anything like that. We are to make sure this project gets built on time, on budget, and in compliance. So the more communication you have with our team, the more likely that is to happen. If you see something, say something. Don't hide it, because when people start hiding stuff or brushing stuff aside, that's when issues happen, and that's when agencies start getting involved. So once an agency raises their eyebrow, at your project and the credibility may be threatened, that's when issues can really come around and a lot more requirements may be triggered. So again, communication to our team, to Josh, we can get out there, make sure we get ahead of these issues and make sure we get everything done in compliance and on time and on budget. So that's ultimately our goal here. And with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. So that kind of concludes the WEAP training.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to chime in case not everyone has seen the comment in the chat, but if you could all email me with the name of the people that attended from your company and the phone number and the company name, just so that I can record it. It's a requirement for this WEAP training. I've received some emails, but just missing a few additional people.
And it's her email is in the chat, but I'm going to spell it out. It's pprATAP@rinconconsultants.com. Rincon is spelled RINCON. So that concludes the WEAP training. Please notify Priya, send her an email with the persons that attended this. Every person working on these projects is required to attend the WEAP training as well as the safety training. And those are two separate things. Josh typically will be the person having you do the safety training, but the WEAP training is recorded. So anybody coming on site does need to watch this training. And I'm going to conclude that. Andrew, I'm going to kick it over to you for any final thoughts or questions.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Thanks to the Rincon team for helping to facilitate this. For everyone that is on the call supporting these projects, you will receive momentarily a link to the SharePoint where the training is being stored. If you can share that with all of your respective subcontractors that are going to be coming on to site, that would be greatly appreciated. I will also have the email contacts in there for Priya as well for you to respond back to with once an attendance has been made. And again, you guys need to watch this prior to arrival. I imagine some folks will show up prior to construction that did not attend. We will have tablets on site as well in the event a few of your resources do arrive without the attendance being completed, so they can watch it there. But that's all I've got. I appreciate everyone's time, and be safe and have a good weekend.
All right, thanks, Andrew. Thanks, everybody. Any questions, reach out to me direct, and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right,
Thanks, everyone.
Kevin.
Great
Thank you very
training.
much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.